Hello, my name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 58 years old. And I'm going to tell you the story of how I lived the first 12 years of my life in poverty without knowing it. And if this story touches your heart, please hit that like button. It helps me share these memories with more people who might need to hear them. It was 1978. I was 6 years old, and I genuinely believed that everyone's electricity took breaks at night. I thought every family ate cereal for dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I was convinced that wearing your cousin's hand-me-downs was just what girls did. Like a sisterhood tradition passed down through generations. I only discovered the devastating truth when I was 18, packing for college, and my mother broke down in tears over a winter coat. But let me take you back to the beginning, back to Detroit, back to Cardone Street. We lived in a narrow house on Cardone Street, on the east side of Detroit. The house always smelled like a mix of fried onions, old wood, and something sweet I could never quite identify. I later learned it was the smell of dampness, covered up with vanilla extract my mother sprayed around. The walls were this faded yellow color, like butter left out in the sun too long. In winter, you could see your breath inside the house in the mornings, little clouds of white puffing out when you talked. Our living room had one couch, a brown plaid thing with scratchy fabric that left marks on your legs if you sat there in shorts. The cushions had permanent dents where each of us sat every night. Mine was the smallest dent, on the far left. My older brother, Luigi. And there was a spot on the right that nobody sat in anymore. But the dent was still there. We didn't talk about that dent. The kitchen was my favorite room, even though it was the smallest. The linoleum floor had this pattern of little yellow flowers, though most of them had been worn away near the sink and stove, leaving just gray underneath. There was one window above the sink, and my mother always kept a glass jar with a single flower on the windowsill, usually a dandelion I'd picked from the alley. But she treated it like it was a rose from a fancy shop. My father, Robert Hayes, worked at the Chrysler plant. Or at least, that's what he told people. He'd leave the house at 5:30 every morning, his lunch pail in one hand, wearing the same blue work pants and jacket. I remember those pants. They were so worn at the knees that the fabric was almost white. But my mother patched them every Sunday night while watching television. She'd sit there with her sewing kit, a wooden box with a faded picture of flowers on top, carefully stitching squares of denim over the holes. I thought she did it because she liked sewing. Because it was a hobby, like how Mrs. Patterson next door liked doing crossword puzzles. My mother, Diana, worked as a cleaning lady for several families in the nicer neighborhoods. She'd leave the house at 6:30, right after making us breakfast, and wouldn't come home until after 5. She always wore the same outfit for work, gray slacks and a white blouse. Both pressed so carefully they looked almost new. Her shoes, though. Her shoes were held together with glue. I could see the line where the sole met the upper part, a thick bead of clear glue that she reapplied every few weeks. But I thought that was just what you did with shoes. I thought everyone glued their shoes. It seemed smart, actually, resourceful. We had routines that felt special, sacred almost. Every morning, my mother would make oatmeal, not the instant kind, but the kind you had to cook for 20 minutes, stirring constantly so it wouldn't stick to the bottom of the pot. She'd put a tiny bit of brown sugar on top, just a sprinkle, and that made it feel like dessert for breakfast. On Sundays, we got to sprinkles. I loved Sundays. After breakfast, my brother Tommy and I would walk to school together. It was 14 blocks, but we didn't mind. We'd make up games counting red cars, or trying to step only on the cracks in the sidewalk, or naming all the dogs we passed. There was Rex, the German shepherd who always barked at us from behind Mrs. Chun's fence. There was Patches, a little mutt who followed us for 3 blocks one day before his owner called him back. And there was Duchess, a fancy poodle who lived in one of the nice houses we passed. The kind with a real lawn instead of dirt and dandelions. Tommy was 9, and he was my hero. He had this way of making everything feel like an adventure. When my shoes got a hole in the bottom and I could feel the cold sidewalk through my sock, he told me I was getting street messages, that I could feel the heartbeat of the city through my feet. When it rained and we didn't have an umbrella, he'd say we were collecting weather points that we could trade in later for good luck. I believed him completely. If you're enjoying this story, I'd love it if you could subscribe to the channel. These memories are precious to me, and sharing them with you makes them feel less heavy somehow. Our house was always cold in winter and hot in summer. We didn't have air conditioning, but my mother said that was because fresh air was better for you anyway. She'd open all the windows and say, "See, natural air conditioning." In winter, we'd all sleep in the living room. The 3 of us huddled under every blanket we owned, plus our winter coats laid on top for extra warmth. I thought it was a sleepover. Every night, I thought it was fun. My mother made everything seem intentional, chosen, special. When we ate cereal for dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays, she called it breakfast for dinner night and made it sound exciting. She'd let us eat it in bowls on the couch while watching TV, which we weren't normally allowed to do. The cereal was always the cheap kind in the big bags, from the discount store. Not the name brand stuff in boxes, but she'd pour it into a big glass jar and say it kept it fresher that way. I believed her. When my clothes came from my cousin Rebecca, who lived in Ann Arbor and whose family had more money than us, though I didn't know that then, my mother would present them to me like gifts. She'd say, "Look what Rebecca sent you. She was thinking of you." She'd wash them and hang them on the line in the backyard. And when I'd put them on, she'd smile and say I looked beautiful, and I felt beautiful. Rebecca's clothes were always a little too big, a little worn. But my mother would roll up the sleeves and the pant legs and say I'd grow into them. She was teaching me to be practical, I thought, to not be wasteful. My only doll was named Rosie. My mother made her from an old sock, to buttons for eyes and yarn for hair. She'd stitched a little dress from fabric scraps, and I loved that doll more than any toy I'd ever seen in a store. Rosie slept with me every night, her button eyes looking up at me in the dark. Her sock body was soft and gave a little when you squeezed her, like a hug back. I didn't know that other girls had closets full of real dolls. Dolls with blinking eyes, and hair you could brush and clothes you could change. I thought Rosie was perfect. I thought all dolls were made with love like that. At school, I didn't notice that other kids had nicer things. Or maybe I noticed, but I didn't understand what it meant. Sarah Morrison had a pencil case with 24 colored pencils, all sharp and perfect, arranged by color. I had 3 crayons in a plastic bag, red, blue, and yellow. But my mother told me those were the primary colors, and you could make any color you wanted by mixing them. She was teaching me about art. I thought I was learning something special. When it was snack time, some kids had packaged cookies or chips. I had crackers in a folded paper towel that my mother had packed that morning. Sometimes the crackers were broken by the time lunch came around, but I'd eat the crumbs anyway, licking my finger and pressing it into the paper towel to get every last bit. I didn't know I was hungry. I just thought I liked crackers. There was this thing that happened every few months. The lights would go out in the evening, and my mother would light candles and say the electricity company was doing maintenance on our street. We'd eat dinner by candlelight, and she'd tell us stories made up tales about princesses and dragons, about brave children who went on adventures. Her voice would get soft and musical, and the candlelight would make shadows dance on the walls. Tommy and I would sit there, our bowls of rice and beans in front of us, completely enchanted. I thought it was magical. I didn't know that the electricity had been shut off because we couldn't pay the bill. I didn't know that my mother told those stories to keep us from being scared of the dark. I didn't know that she'd go to the electric company the next day and beg them to turn it back on, promising to pay something, anything, next week. I just knew that candlelight dinners were special. Mrs. Patterson, our next-door neighbor, was an older black woman with gray hair. She kept in 2 braids wrapped around her head like a crown. She was always kind to us, always had a smile. Sometimes, she'd knock on our door with a plate of food. I made too much. She'd say, "Fried chicken, or cornbread, or greens cooked with ham." My mother would thank her, and after Mrs. Patterson left, we'd eat like it was Thanksgiving. I thought Mrs. Patterson just really liked cooking. I thought she was just generous, the way some people are. I didn't know that she knew. I didn't know that she could hear through the thin walls when our stomachs growled. I didn't know that she and my mother had an unspoken agreement, a quiet kindness that let my mother keep her dignity while making sure we ate. At school, there was free lunch for some kids. I wasn't one of those kids, officially. My mother made too much money barely, but too much. So I'd bring lunch from home. But my teacher, Mrs. Kowalski, this Polish woman with glasses that hung on a chain around her neck, would sometimes say, "Margaret, I have an extra sandwich today. Do you want it?" And I'd take it, grateful, thinking how nice it was that Mrs. Kowalski always made too much lunch. I didn't know she was buying extra food with her own money. I didn't know that she'd seen me eating crackers and nothing else. I didn't know that she'd talked to the school counselor about me. About Tommy, about the Hayes kids who always wore clothes that were a little too big and a little too worn. In winter, my coat was my brother's old coat. It was a boy's coat, navy blue and puffy, with a small tear in one sleeve that my mother had sewn shut with thread that didn't quite match. The coat was too big for me. The sleeves hung past my hands, and the bottom hit below my knees. My mother said I looked cozy. She said I looked warm as toast, and I was warm. So I thought it was perfect. I didn't notice that other girls had pink coats or purple coats, coats that fit them properly, coats without patches, or if I noticed, it didn't matter. I had a coat. I was warm. What else mattered? There was this one time I must have been 7 when a girl named Jennifer asked me why I always wore the same pants. She wasn't being mean, just curious. I looked down at my jeans, the ones with the flower patches my mother had sewn on the knees, and I said, "These are my favorite pants." And they were. I loved those flower patches. I thought my mother had put them there to make the pants prettier. Jennifer said, "Oh," and we went back to playing hopscotch. I didn't know that those patches were covering holes. I didn't know that my mother stayed up late at night, her eyes tired from cleaning other people's houses all day, carefully stitching those patches on because I needed pants for school and we couldn't afford new ones. I just knew I had the prettiest patches of anyone. Birthdays in our house were special. Not because of presents. There was usually only one small present, if any, but because of the cake. My mother would bake a cake from scratch, and she'd let me help. We'd crack the eggs together, measure the flour, stir the batter. The house would smell like vanilla and sugar, warm and sweet. She couldn't afford fancy decorations, so she'd use what we had. One year, she arranged Cheerios in a circle on top and called it a flour cake. Another year, she melted chocolate chips and drizzled them in patterns, making it look like a fancy bakery cake. And it tasted better than any bakery cake I've ever had since. We'd sing happy birthday, just the three of us, my mother, Tommy, and me, and I'd blow out candles she'd used from previous birthdays, saved carefully in a drawer. The candles were different colors and different sizes, a mismatched collection, but when they were all lit together, they were beautiful. I thought everyone reused birthday candles. I thought it was traditional, like blowing them out and making a wish. Tommy's birthday was in September. Mine was in March. On the months in between, when there were no birthdays, my mother would sometimes say, "Let's have a half-birthday celebration." And she'd make a small cake or cookies, and we'd celebrate nothing at all, just being together. I thought we were the luckiest family in the world. There was a TV in our living room, a small box, with antennas that you had to adjust to get a clear picture. It only got 3 channels, and sometimes not even that, the picture would go fuzzy, and my father would have to fiddle with the antennas, wrapping aluminum foil around them to help the signal, but we had shows we loved. Little House on the Prairie was my favorite. I'd watch Lovre Ingalls and think about how similar our lives were, living simply, making do with what we had, being happy anyway. I didn't realize I was watching a show about poverty set in the 1800s and thinking, yes, that's exactly like my life in 1970s Detroit. I didn't realize that the comparison should have told me something. Every Sunday, we'd go to church. Not because we were particularly religious, though my mother believed in God in a quiet, personal way, but because after church, there was a community meal in the basement. Everyone brought something to share, and we'd all eat together. My mother would bring a dish, usually something simple like a pot of beans or a plate of cornbread made from the cheapest mix she could find, but the table would be covered with food. Fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, collard greens, sweet potato pie, rolls, salads, casseroles. We'd fill our plates and eat until we were full, actually full. I thought everyone looked forward to Sunday dinner like that. I thought everyone was just excited to eat together as a community. I didn't know that, for some of us, it was the only meal all week where we got enough to eat. I didn't know that the church ladies, black, white, Polish, Mexican, all of us mixed together in that East Detroit neighborhood, had an understanding that Sunday dinner was about more than fellowship. It was about survival. And they made sure everyone survived with dignity. After dinner, while the adults cleaned up, Tommy and I would play with the other kids in the church parking lot. We'd play tag or hide and seek, or make up elaborate games with sticks and rocks and our imaginations. I had friends there, Marcus, whose father worked at the same plant as my dad, Kaisha, whose mother was a nurse's aide and who always had her hair in the most beautiful braids with colored beads at the ends, Jose, who spoke Spanish at home and English at church, switching between the two mid-sentence sometimes. We were all the same, us kids. We all wore hand-me-downs. We all looked forward to Sunday dinner. We all had parents who worked hard and came home tired. But we didn't think of ourselves as poor. We thought of ourselves as normal, because everyone we knew lived like we did. At school, there were other kids, richer kids, kids whose parents were managers or owned businesses or were doctors, kids who lived in houses with real grass lawns and more than one bathroom, kids who went on vacations in the summer and came back with tans and stories about beaches or amusement parks. But I didn't really talk to those kids. They seemed to live in a different world, and our worlds didn't really overlap except in the classroom, so I didn't compare. I didn't wonder why my life was different from theirs. I just lived my life. There was this one winter I must have been 8 when the heat in our house stopped working. My father tried to fix it himself, spending hours in the basement with tools, his breath making clouds in the air. But he couldn't get it working. My mother bought a kerosene heater, one of those small orange ones that you fill up with fuel. She set it up in the living room, and that's where we all slept that winter. The three of us, plus my mother and father, all in the living room, huddled around that small heater. My mother made it an adventure. She called it our camping winter and told us stories about pioneers and explorers who had to keep warm in the wilderness. She'd make hot chocolate, the cheap kind from powder, mixed with water. Instead of milk hand, we'd sip it from our mugs, feeling the warmth spread through our bodies. I thought it was fun. A special winter, our camping winter. I didn't know that my father had gone to 3 different repair shops and couldn't afford to fix the furnace. I didn't know that the kerosene heater was a fire hazard, and my mother stayed up late every night, terrified, watching to make sure nothing went wrong. I didn't know that she went to work every day exhausted, running on no sleep, worrying herself sick. I just knew that I was warm enough, and we were together, and my mother made the best hot chocolate. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up and hear my parents talking in the kitchen. Their voices would be low, serious, and I'd catch words here and there. Bills, paycheck, not enough. We'll figure it out. But then my mother would laugh this soft, tired laugh and say something like, "We always do, don't we, Robert?" And my father would murmur something back, and they'd keep talking, problem solving, figuring it out. I'd fall back asleep, secure in the knowledge that my parents had everything under control, that we were fine, that we'd always be fine, because we always had been. Looking back now, I marvel at how my mother did it, how she took our poverty and wrapped it in love and creativity and determination, presenting it to us like a gift, how she made deprivation feel like adventure, how she taught us resilience without us ever knowing we were learning it. But at the time, I didn't know I had anything to marvel at. I just knew I had a mother who loved me. Leave a comment below and tell me about a moment from your childhood that you understood differently once you grew up. I read every single one of your stories. 4th grade was the year things started to shift, though I didn't fully understand it then. My teacher that year was Miss Anderson, a young white woman fresh out of college with bright red hair and freckles across her nose. She was energetic, enthusiastic, always trying new things with us. One day, she announced we'd be doing a project about our homes. "I want you to draw a picture of your house and write about what makes it special," she said. Passing out large sheets of white paper, I was excited. I loved our house. I got to work immediately, drawing the narrow yellow building, the small windows, the front steps where Tommy and I sat in the summer. I drew the flower box my mother kept on the window, even though it usually just had weeds we pretended were flowers. I drew smoke coming out of the chimney. Even though our chimney never had smoke, we didn't use the fireplace, because my father said it wasn't safe. Under the picture, I wrote, "My house is special because it's full of love. My mom makes the best dinners and tells the best stories. My brother and I play games and we are happy. Our house is the best house on Cardoni Street." I was proud of my work. When Miss Anderson collected the projects, she spent a long time looking at mine. Her smile got smaller, tighter. She didn't say anything, just patted my shoulder and moved on. The next week, she hung all the projects on the wall for Parents' Night. I remember walking along the wall, looking at everyone's drawings. Sarah Morrison had drawn a huge house with a 2-car garage and a swimming pool. Christopher Banks had drawn a house with a big porch and a swing set in the backyard. Even Marcus, my friend from church, had drawn a house bigger than ours. I stood in front of my drawing, our narrow yellow house, so much smaller than the others, and felt something shift in my chest, something I couldn't name yet, but I pushed it away. Size didn't matter, I told myself. It was what was inside that counted. It was what my mother had always taught me. That same year, there was a girl in my class named Danielle. Her family had just moved to Detroit from somewhere California, I think. Her father had gotten a job as an engineer at Ford. They'd bought a house in Palmer Woods, one of the nice neighborhoods. Danielle was nice enough, but she lived in a different universe than the rest of us. She'd talk about things like vacation homes and piano lessons and summer camps. She had a different outfit every single day, clothes that matched perfectly, clothes that were clearly new. One day, she invited several girls from class to her birthday party. The invitation was on fancy cardstock with raised printing. I watched her hand them out to Sarah, to Jennifer, to Emma, to Melissa. She didn't hand one to me. At first, I told myself it was fine. She probably only had a certain number of invitations, or maybe her mother said she could only invite a few people. It didn't mean anything. But then, at lunch, I heard them all talking about it, about Danielle's huge house, about the pool in her backyard, about how there was going to be a real DJ and a chocolate fountain and goodie bags for everyone. Something sour settled in my stomach. That afternoon, when I got home, my mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Rice and beans again. Tommy was at the table doing homework. "Mom," I said, sliding into a chair, "why don't we have a pool?" My mother looked up from the pot she was stirring. "A pool?" "Yeah, like Danielle has." In her backyard, my mother wiped her hands on her apron. "Well, honey, pools are very expensive. And they take a lot of work to maintain. We have other priorities." "Like what?" "Like keeping a roof over our heads. Like making sure you and Tommy have food to eat and clothes to wear." I thought about this. Danielle's parents can do both. Pool and food. My mother's expression shifted just slightly, just for a second, a tightness around her eyes. But then she smiled. "Danielle's family is very fortunate. Different families have different resources. That doesn't make any family better or worse, just different. But don't you wish we had more resources?" She came over and cupped my face in her hands. Her palms were rough, calloused from work. "Margaret, listen to me. We have everything we need. We have each other. We have love. We have enough. Never let anyone make you feel like you're less than because you don't have fancy things. Your value doesn't come from what you own. It comes from who you are." I nodded, wanting to believe her. But that sour feeling in my stomach didn't completely go away. That spring, something happened that I didn't fully understand until years later. It was a Thursday afternoon. The lunch lady at school, Mrs. Jenkins, this heavyset, black woman with a loud laugh and hands that could make the best meatloaf I'd ever tasted, called me over as I was leaving the cafeteria. "Margaret, honey, come here a second." I walked over. She was standing by the serving line, wiping down the counter. "I made extra sloppy joes today," she said, not looking at me, focused on her cleaning. "Made way too much, actually. Would you do me a favor and take some home for your family? I hate to see it go to waste." She handed me a brown paper bag, grease already starting to seep through the bottom. The bag was warm in my hands, heavy. "Sure, Mrs. Jenkins. Thank you." She smiled then, a big warm smile. "You're a good girl, Margaret. You tell your mama I said hello." I walked home with that bag, and when I gave it to my mother, her eyes got shiny. She blinked rapidly and turned away, busying herself with putting the food in containers. "That was very thoughtful of Mrs. Jenkins," she said, her voice tight. We ate those sloppy joes for dinner that night, and it was like a feast. Real meat, rich and savory, on soft buns. Tommy and I ate until we were stuffed. I thought Mrs. Jenkins was just nice. Just generous, like Mrs. Patterson. I didn't know that Mrs. Jenkins did this every Thursday. I didn't know that she'd talk to Mrs. Kowalski, who'd talk to the school counselor, who'd quietly let Mrs. Jenkins know which families needed extra help. I didn't know that Mrs. Jenkins spent her own money buying extra food to cook, just so she could send it home with kids like me. I didn't know that I made too much was code for I see you, and I want to help, and I want you to keep your dignity while I do it. I just thought we were lucky to have such nice people in our lives. Around this time I must have been 9. I started noticing my mother more carefully, really looking at her. She was beautiful, my mother. Even tired, even worn down, she was beautiful. She had dark hair that she kept pulled back in a bun, and dark eyes that were always watchful, always aware. Her hands were never still, always cooking, cleaning, sewing, fixing something. But there were things I started noticing. Like how she never sat down during dinner. She'd serve Tommy and me, make sure we had everything we needed. Then stand at the counter eating her own small portion, saying she preferred to eat standing up. Easier to get seconds for you kids if you need them, she'd say. Like how she wore the same 2 outfits, rotating them while making sure Tommy and I always had clothes that fit. Like how she'd say she wasn't hungry at breakfast, that she didn't eat in the mornings, just coffee. Black coffee, because we didn't have milk most of the time. Like how she'd talk about the big lunch she had at work, describing elaborate meals at the houses she cleaned. Mrs. Richardson gave me leftover pot roast today, she'd say. Or, the Wilsons had a dinner party and sent me home with so much food. I believed these stories completely. Why wouldn't I? But there was this one time, I must have been 10, when I went with my mother to one of her cleaning jobs. It was a Saturday, and I'd begged to come along, curious about the houses she cleaned. She'd finally agreed, saying I could help and earn a little spending money. The house was in Grosse Pointe, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen. The driveway was longer than our entire street. The house itself was massive white with columns, like something from a movie. The lawn was perfect, green and smooth as a carpet. Inside, everything sparkled. Marble floors, cristal chandelier, furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. The kitchen was bigger than our entire first floor, with appliances I didn't even know the purpose of. Mrs. Richardson, the owner, was a thin woman with blonde hair in a perfect bob. She wore white pants and a silk blouse in the middle of the day. She smiled at me, but it was a distant smile, polite but not warm. "Diana, you'll do the usual today," she said to my mother. "And make sure you get the windows in the study, they have streaks." "Yes, ma'am," my mother said softly. I watched my mother clean that day, really watched her. She scrubbed toilets, and mopped floors and dusted furniture, and cleaned windows until her arms shook. She was on her hands and knees scrubbing grout with a toothbrush. She was reaching up high to dust ceiling fans, stretching until I could see the strain in her back. Mrs. Richardson passed by a few times, checking the work, pointing out spots my mother had missed. My mother never complained, just said, "Yes, ma'am," and fixed it. At lunchtime, Mrs. Richardson left a sandwich on the kitchen counter for my mother. One sandwich. White bread with a thin slice of ham and wilted lettuce. My mother broke it in half and gave me the bigger piece. "Aren't you hungry, Mama?" I asked. "I had a big breakfast," she lied. I ate my half sandwich slowly, watching my mother eat hers in 3 bites, then get back to work. We worked for 6 hours that day. When we finished, Mrs. Richardson inspected everything, then handed my mother cash. I saw the amount $30, $5 an hour. For both of us on the bus ride home, I was quiet. Something was churning in my stomach, something I couldn't name. "Mama," I finally said, "does Mrs. Richardson always talk to you like that?" "Like what, baby? Like you're not. Like she's better than you." My mother looked at me, surprised. Then she took my hand. "Mrs. Richardson is my employer. She's paying me to do a job. That's all it is." "But Margaret," her voice was firm, "I clean houses so that you and Tommy can have what you need. There's no shame in honest work. None. You understand me?" I nodded, but something had shifted. Something I couldn't unsee. That night, at dinner, rice and beans again, stretched with extra water to make it go further, I watched my mother standing at the counter, eating her small portion. "Mama, why don't you sit with us?" "I'm fine here, honey. Please." She looked at me for a long moment, then sighed and sat down. Her plate had maybe 1/3 of what Tommy and I had. "Aren't you hungry?" I asked. "I'm fine. I had a big lunch, but I'd been with her all day. I'd seen that half sandwich." That was all she'd eaten. The lie hung in the air between us. I didn't call her out on it. I was 10 years old, and I still wanted to believe what she told me. So I pretended I believed her, and she pretended I believed her, and we ate in silence. But something had cracked open inside me, and I couldn't close it again. 5th grade was when I really started to understand. It was a Tuesday in November. I remember because it was the week before Thanksgiving. And everyone at school was talking about what their families were doing for the holiday. Turkey and stuffing and cranberry sauce and pies, pumpkin, apple, pecan. My family didn't do big Thanksgivings. "We'd have chicken instead of turkey, cheaper," my mother said, "and just as good." Sometimes we'd go to the church community dinner, where everyone brought something and we'd all eat together. But that Tuesday, something happened that changed everything. Our teacher, Miss Anderson, announced that we were going to do a food drive for families in need. She explained that there were families in Detroit who didn't have enough food, who couldn't afford a proper Thanksgiving dinner. "So we're going to collect canned goods and non-perishables," she said cheerfully. "And the week before Thanksgiving, we'll pack them into boxes and deliver them to families who need them." She put a big cardboard box at the front of the classroom, decorated with paper turkeys and leaves that students had made. Over the next few days, kids started bringing in donations. Cans of green beans and corn and cranberry sauce. Boxes of stuffing mix and instant mashed potatoes. Even some canned hams. Sarah Morrison brought in 3 bags of groceries. "My mom went shopping just for this," she announced proudly. The box filled up. Then we started a second box, then a third. And I felt strange, proud to be part of something good, something that was helping people. But also uncomfortable in a way I couldn't quite name. The Monday before Thanksgiving, Miss Anderson said we were going to pack the boxes, and she needed volunteers to help deliver them after school. Several hands shot up. Mine included. "Wonderful," Miss Anderson said. "And I have the list of families who will receive the boxes. Let's see." She read out names from her clipboard. Names I recognized, some kids in other grades, some families from church. Then she said Hayes family, Cardoni Street. Everything stopped. The classroom sounds, kids shuffling papers, whispered conversations. A pencil dropping, all seemed to happen very far away. Hayes family. My family We were on the list. We were one of the families who needed help. I felt my face get hot. My hands started shaking. I looked down at my desk, hoping nobody had noticed, hoping nobody made the connection. But Jennifer, sitting next to me, turned and looked at me with this expression: surprise and pity mixed together. "Margaret, is that? It's a different Hayes family," I said quickly. "Common name." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push it. I stopped raising my hand. That afternoon, I walked home the long way, taking extra time, hoping to avoid seeing anyone from school at my house. When I got home, my mother was in the kitchen. There, on our table, was a cardboard box filled with food. Cans and boxes and even a small turkey. My mother was crying, not sobbing. Just silent tears running down her face while she unpacked the box, putting things away in our nearly empty cupboards. "Mama," she wiped her eyes quickly. "Hi, baby. Look what we got. Isn't this wonderful? Such kind people. Mama, we're poor." The words came out before I could stop them. She froze, a can of corn in her hand. "What? We're poor. We're one of the poor families." She set down the can very carefully. "Margaret, that food drive at school, we're getting a box. Because we're poor." Everyone knows. Everyone. My mother came over and tried to hug me, but I stepped back. "We're not poor," she said. "We're just going through a tight time." "Your father, we're poor," I said again, louder. "We eat rice and beans almost every day." "You don't eat lunch. Ever. Tommy's shoes have cardboard in them because the bottoms have holes. Our heat doesn't work right. The electricity gets turned off. Mrs. Jenkins sends food home with me every week. Mrs. Patterson brings us dinner. We're poor, Mama. We're poor and everyone knows it except me." My mother's face crumpled. She sat down at the table, her head in her hands. I'd never seen her like this. My mother, who was always strong, always positive, always making everything okay. And I'd broken her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, baby. I tried so hard to make sure you didn't feel I wanted you to have a normal childhood. I wanted you to be happy." I sat down next to her. I was angry and hurt and confused, but I was also 10 years old, and seeing my mother cry made everything else disappear. "I am happy," I said softly. I was happy. I don't know anymore. We sat there in silence for a long time. Finally, she took my hands. "You want to know the truth?" I nodded, and she told me. She told me that my father had been laid off from Chrysler 8 months ago. That he'd been looking for work, but couldn't find anything that paid enough. That he'd been taking odd jobs, day labor, under-the-table work. Anything he could find, but it wasn't steady. She told me that she worked 6 days a week cleaning houses, 12 hours a day sometimes. And that she lied about eating at work, because the truth was she couldn't afford to eat and feed us too. She told me that Tommy's shoes had cardboard in them because she was saving money for winter coats for both of us, and we couldn't have both shoes and coats. She told me that the electricity got turned off because sometimes she had to choose between electricity and gas for heat. And heat won. She told me that our house was cold because the furnace broke 2 years ago and they couldn't afford to fix it. She told me that every single dollar went to keeping us fed and clothed and safe. That there was nothing left over, nothing but the cake, I said, and the stories. And making everything fun, she smiled through her tears. That didn't cost money, baby. Love is free. Imagination is free. I could give you those things, even when I couldn't give you anything else. Why didn't you tell me? Because you're a child. You should get to be a child. You shouldn't have to worry about money and bills and where the next meal is coming from. I wanted to protect you from that for as long as I could. I understood what she was saying, but I also felt betrayed. Like I'd been living in a lie, a beautiful lie, but a lie nonetheless. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, which was actually just a mattress on the floor. I'd realized earlier that day when I really looked at it, thinking about everything. Thinking about all the signs I'd missed. The candlelight dinners weren't magical. They were because we couldn't pay the electric bill. The camping winter wasn't an adventure. It was because we had no heat. My mother's preference for standing while eating wasn't a quirk. It was so she could pretend she'd eaten while giving us her portion. The hand-me-downs from Rebecca weren't generous gifts. They were charity. Mrs. Jenkins' extra food wasn't accidental. It was intentional, a kindness to a family she knew was struggling. The church Sunday dinners weren't just fellowship. They were a lifeline. My beautiful sock doll wasn't a creative choice. It was the only kind of doll my mother could give me. Everything I thought I understood was actually something else, entirely. I felt stupid, naive. How had I not seen it? But then I thought about the kids at our school who did have money, how some of them looked at me. That mix of pity and superiority I'd seen in Jennifer's eyes that day. Is that how everyone saw me? Poor Margaret Hayes. Too dumb to even know she was poor. The thought made me want to disappear. The next few weeks were strange. It was like someone had given me glasses that let me see the world clearly for the first time, and I couldn't stop seeing. I saw the way my mother's hands shook sometimes from exhaustion. I saw the way my father's shoulders slumped when he came home from another day of job, hunting with nothing to show for it. I saw the way Tommy had stopped growing out of his clothes because there weren't new clothes to grow into. I saw the way our cupboards were bare except for rice, beans, and the donated food from the food drive. I saw everything. And it broke my heart. If this story is touching something in you, please leave a comment. Your words mean more to me than you know. It was a cold Saturday in December when everything came to a head. I'd been invited to Emma's house after school. Emma was one of the nicer girls in my class, and she'd asked several girls over for a holiday party. I'd never been to her house before. My mother had hesitated when I asked if I could go. Margaret, I don't know. Please, Mama, everyone else is going. She'd finally agreed, and that Saturday afternoon, Emma's mother picked me up in their car, a big, shiny sedan that smelled like new leather and vanilla air freshener. Emma's house was in the suburbs. It wasn't as big as Danielle's, but it was beautiful. 2 stories, with a manicured lawn and a wreath on the front door. Inside, it was warm, actually warm. The kind of warmth that comes from central heating working properly. It smelled like cinnamon and pine. There were 5 of us girls there. Emma's mother had set up activities, making ornaments, decorating cookies, watching a Christmas movie. There were snacks everywhere, cheese and crackers, little sandwiches, chips and dip, candy, soda. I tried to not stare, tried to act normal. But everything was so abundant. So easy, so different from my life. At one point, we were in Emma's room, and she was showing us her closet. It was full, and I mean full of clothes. Dresses and skirts and pants and shirts, all organized by color. She had a whole section just for shoes. My mom says I have too many clothes. Emma laughed. She's making me donate some before Christmas, so I have room for new ones. Donate. She was going to give away perfectly good clothes, because she had too many. While I was wearing pants that used to be my cousin's, with patches on the knees. Something twisted in my chest. Later, Emma's mother served us dinner homemade pizza, with real cheese that stretched when you pulled it. Salad and brownies for dessert. We all sat at their big dining room table, and Emma's mother asked us about school. I was quiet, just eating, trying to not eat too fast even though I was hungry. So hungry. After dinner, while we were watching a movie, Emma's mother pulled me aside gently. "Margaret, honey, I packed some leftovers for you to take home. And I have some clothes that Emma has outgrown. They're practically new. I thought maybe you could use them." She said it kindly, gently, but I heard what she wasn't saying. "I know your family needs help." My face burned. "No thank you, ma'am. We're fine. Are you sure?" "It's really no trouble. We're fine," I said again, more firmly. She nodded, but she looked concerned. When she drove me home later, I saw her looking at our house. Our narrow, shabby, yellow house with the peeling paint and the sagging porch. I saw her expression shift just slightly, and I wanted to sink through the floor of her car. "Thank you for having me," I said quickly, opening the door before she could say anything else. "Margaret, wait the leftovers. No thank you." I called back, already hurrying to my front door. Inside, my mother was in the kitchen. How was the party? Fine, just fine. I hurriedly looked at her. At her worn face and tired eyes. At her hands, red and rough from cleaning chemicals. At the dress she was wearing, the same dress she always wore at home, faded and threadbare. "Emma's mom tried to give me charity," I said. "Leftovers and hand-me-downs." My mother's face tightened. "That was kind of her. It was humiliating. Margaret, I don't want to be the poor kid anymore." The words burst out of me. I don't want people feeling sorry for me. I don't want teachers giving me extra food. I don't want food drives with our name on the list. I don't want Emma's mom looking at our house like it's sad. I hate this. I hate being poor. My mother stood there, speechless. I ran to my room, our room. Actually, the one room Tommy and I shared, with our mattresses on the floor and our clothes in cardboard boxes because we didn't have dresses. Anne threw myself on my bed. I cried, deep, gulping sobs. For everything I'd lost. For the innocence I couldn't get back. For the unfairness of it all. My mother came in and sat on the edge of my mattress. She didn't say anything, just rubbed my back while I cried. Finally, when the tears slowed, she spoke. "You're right to be angry," she said softly. "This is hard. It's not fair. And I'm sorry, so sorry that you have to experience this. Why us?" I asked, my voice muffled by my pillow. "Why are we poor and other people aren't? Life isn't fair, baby. Some people are born into families with money. Some aren't. Your father and I, we're doing our absolute best. We work as hard as we can, but sometimes hard work isn't enough. Sometimes the system is broken, and people like us fall through the cracks. I hate it. I know. Will it always be like this?" She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. I hope not. Your father is still looking for work. Things could get better. But I can't promise you when or how." I rolled over and looked at her. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, baby. No, you just be a kid. You just focus on school and your friends and being 11 years old. This is not your burden to carry, but it felt like my burden. Because I lived it, I wore it. I carried it to school every day in my patched pants and too big coat. That night, I made a decision. I was lying in bed, listening to Tommy's breathing in the dark, and I thought about everything. I couldn't change the fact that we were poor. I couldn't magically give my parents money or make my father get his job back. But I could change how I dealt with it. I could stop being ashamed. I could stop letting other people's pity make me feel small. I could hold my head high and know that being poor didn't make me less than anyone else. My mother had been trying to teach me this all along. That our value didn't come from what we owned. That love and family and character mattered more than money. I'd understood it when I was little. Somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten. So I decided to remember. The next Monday at school, Jennifer came up to me at lunch. My mom has some clothes she was going to donate. Do you want them first? The old me from last week would have said no, would have been humiliated. The new me looked her in the eye and said, that would be great. Thank you. She blinked, surprised. Oh, okay, I'll bring them tomorrow, and she did. A bag of clothes that were nicer than anything I owned. I took them home, and my mother and I went through them together, and we kept what fit and passed along what didn't to other families at church. It became easier after that, accepting help, accepting kindness. Mrs. Jenkins kept sending food home, and I thanked her sincerely, instead of pretending not to notice. Mrs. Patterson kept bringing over plates of food, and we invited her to eat with us sometimes. The church community kept including us in meals and support, and we showed up with gratitude. And slowly, gradually, things did get better. My father got a job not at Chrysler, but at a smaller company, making less money but steady money, enough that we could pay our bills on time. Enough that we could fix the furnace. Enough that my mother could cut back to 5 days a week instead of 6. We were still poor, still struggling, still scraping by. But we were surviving. And I was learning that survival, with dignity and love intact, was something to be proud of. The years passed. I went to middle school, then high school. I got a part-time job at 15, working at a diner, and gave most of my paycheck to my mother. Tommy got a job too, at a gas station. We all contributed help, because that's what families do. By the time I was 17, applying to colleges, I'd become someone different than that little girl who thought everyone's electricity took breaks. I'd become someone who understood that poverty wasn't a moral failing, that hard work didn't always equal success, that the system was rigged against people like my parents, and that their struggle wasn't their fault. I'd become someone who valued what truly mattered: love, kindness, resilience, character. And I'd become someone determined to break the cycle. I got into Michigan State on a full scholarship. Full ride tuition, room, board, everything. The day I got the acceptance letter, my mother cried, happy tears this time. You did it, baby, she said, holding the letter like it was made of gold. You're going to college. The summer before I left for school, I was packing my things. My mother came into my room with something in her hands. A winter coat. Not just any coat. A brand new, beautiful, warm winter coat in deep blue. My size, with no patches, no tears, no history of being someone else's first. Mama, I've been saving, she said quietly. A little bit every week, since you got your acceptance letter. I wanted you to have something new. Something just yours. I took the coat, feeling the weight of it, the quality of it. And I started crying. Thank you, I whispered. You deserve it, she said. You deserve all of it. That night, my last night at home before leaving for college, I couldn't sleep. I got up and found my mother in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of tea. I sat down next to her. Mama, I need to tell you something. She looked at me, concerned. What is it, baby? I know what you did. All those years. I know you didn't eat, so we could eat. I know you lied about being full. I know you worked yourself to exhaustion. I know you sacrificed everything, her eyes filled with tears. And I need you to know that I saw it. I see it now. And I'm so grateful. Not just for the food or the clothes or the roof over my head, but for teaching me that love looks like sacrifice, that strength looks like endurance. That dignity has nothing to do with money. Margaret, I'm going to make you proud, I said fiercely. I'm going to graduate. I'm going to get a good job. And I'm going to make sure you never have to clean another person's house for a living. I swear to you. She pulled me into a hug, holding me tight. You already make me proud, she whispered. Every single day, and I believed her. I went to Michigan State. I studied harder than everyone around me, because I knew what it cost for me to be there. I worked part-time jobs, sent money home when I could. I graduated in 4 years, with a degree in social work, because I wanted to help families like mine. Families struggling, families slipping through the cracks, families working 3 jobs and still not making ends meet. I got a job with the state, working with low-income families. Pay was enough. And true to my word, I made sure my mother never had to clean houses again. My parents are both gone now. My father died in 2010, my mother in 2018. Both of them got to see me build a life. Both of them got to see me buy my own house, nothing fancy, but mine. Both of them got to see that their sacrifices meant something. In my mother's last months, when she was sick and I was taking care of her, we talked about those years on Cardoni Street. Do you remember when you thought everyone's electricity took breaks? She asked, a small smile on her tired face. I remember, I said. I'm sorry I lied to you. About so many things. Don't be, I said, taking her hand. You gave me something precious. You gave me a childhood where I felt loved and safe, even when we had nothing. You gave me memories of candlelight dinners and camping winters and flower patch jeans. You gave me everything that mattered. She squeezed my hand. I just wanted you to be happy. I said. I am. And it was true. Today, I'm 58 years old. I work with families in Detroit, families struggling just like mine did. And I try to do for them what Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Jenkins and Mrs. Kowalski and all those kind people did for us. I see them. I help them. I do it with dignity and respect, never making them feel small for needing help, because I know. I know what it's like to be poor and not know it. I know what it's like to discover you're poor and feel ashamed. And I know what it's like to understand, finally, that poverty is just a circumstance, not an identity, not a destiny, not a measure of worth. If you grew up with very little, if you remember hand-me-downs and empty cupboards and parents who weren't hungry at dinner, I want you to know something. You weren't deprived of a childhood. You had a childhood wrapped in love. Those mended clothes weren't signs of poverty. They were signs of a mother who stayed up late making sure you had something to wear. That simple food wasn't a lack. It was a parent choosing to feed you instead of themselves. Those creative gifts weren't because your parents didn't care. They were because your parents cared so much they made something from nothing. And if you can look back now and see all the ways your parents protected you, all the ways they sacrificed, all the ways they loved you even when they had nothing material to give, tell them, don't wait. If they're still alive, call them today, right now, and say, I saw what you did. I understand now. Thank you. Because one day, they won't be there to hear it. And you'll wish you had said it sooner. So that's my story. The story of my Detroit childhood, when I didn't know we were poor. When poverty looked like love. When having nothing meant having everything that mattered. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Please share your own stories in the comments. I want to hear about your childhood, your memories, the moments you understood differently once you grew up. Every story matters. Every experience deserves to be heard. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. These stories need to be told. These memories need to be preserved. Not because poverty is beautiful, it's not, but because love is. And love can exist anywhere. Even on Cardoni Street, even in houses with no heat, even in families with nothing but each other. If your parents are still with you, please call them today. Tell them you saw what they did. Tell them you understand. Tell them thank you. You'll be glad you did. I promise.